There was something wild about Mona. She had an untamable spirit, a wit sharper than any sword, and a habit of laughing when others would cry. Orphaned at 10 and growing up in the bustling streets of Lagos, she learned the art of survival in a world that didn't owe her anything. Yet, fate had a strange way of twisting stories, and hers took a wild turn when she met Hilary, the most handsome and richest billionaire in the city. Hilary Norman was the heir to the Don Norman fortune. His family had wealth beyond imagination, with skyscrapers bearing their name and influence woven into the highest levels of society. Women flocked to him. But there was something about Mona that no one could quite explain. She was unrefined, unpredictable, and unafraid to speak her mind. He was smitten by her. But of course, things were never that simple. Their relationship had awakened a lot of parasites in Hilary's life. The battle begins. Hilary's parents, Chief and Mrs. Don Norman, were appalled by his choice. How could their son, the golden boy of Lagos, fall for a girl with no pedigree, no background, and no manners? They were used to power, and they would do anything to keep Mona out of their son's life. Mrs. Norman, in particular, saw this as her personal mission to make the riff-raff disappear. The first time Mrs. Norman met Mona, she was horrified. Mona wore street clothes, her shoes were hideous, and her hair were in need of a cut or styling. But what infuriated her the most was the way Mona laughed. A deep belly laugh, like nothing in the world could ever touch her.
"You cannot be serious,"
Mrs. Norman had muttered under her breath, commenting on what Mona had told her earlier.
Oh, yes. I am so serious, ma'am. You know, I used to sell oranges down the street from your mansion. Small world.
Mona had replied with a grin that made the older woman clench her teeth. Mrs. Norman wasn't one to give up easily. She had a plan, and it started with some bundles of money.
"Here's $5,000.
She said, sliding the paper across the table to Mona, who sat opposite her, sipping on a can of soda.
"I'm sure you've never seen something like it. It should be about 7 to 8 million naira. Take it."
Mona stared at the money for a long moment, then looked up at Mrs. Norman, her eyes sparkling.
Ah, Auntie, this is very nice. Very, very nice. I could build a small business of my own with this. Maybe even rent an apartment in GRA. Thank you.
Mrs. Norman smiled, thinking she had one.
But you see, Ma,
Mona continued, pushing the money back to her.
Hilary is worth more than 8 million naira to me. If I take this, I will have to say goodbye to him. And then who will make me laugh? Who will buy me Benz and my dream Range Rover? And also the supermarket you promised me. Who will give me all that? I'm sorry. But no, thank you.
Although she wasn't interested in all of that, his money wasn't the sole purpose of her love for him. She wasn't just going to let Mrs. Norman disrespect her like that and get away without a shock to her bone marrow.
"Oh, so you love my son for his money?"
I didn't say that entirely. I mean, it's not really entirely what I want. But, I mean, Mama, that pretty money he has is kind of a bonus. Everyone loves bonuses. I do love your son, but I love money too. And he can give me all the money that I want, and I will have my clear conscience.
She spat out, leaving Mrs. Norman dumbfounded as she picked her purse and walked out. Mona wasn't the only love interest in Hilary's life. There was Sonia, a stunning and sophisticated woman from a wealthy family who had been betrothed to Hilary since they were children. Sonia had everything Mona lacked: wealth, class, respectable educational background, and the favor of Hilary's parents. And she was madly in love with him. When Sonia found out about Mona, she despised her with a burning passion. She had always been the queen bee in any room she entered, and yet here was this street girl, with nothing but charm and an irritating laugh, stealing Hilary from her. One evening, Sonia arranged to meet Mona in a high-end restaurant, thinking she could intimidate her.
You should know, Hilary and I are practically married. We belong to each other. So you better stay away. You're this riffraff.
Sonia said, her voice dripping with disdain. Mona took a long sip from her bottle of malt, shrugged, and smiled brightly.
You're right. You two are perfect for each other. But Hilary keeps calling me. So what do? I can't just ignore him. That would be rude.
Mona replied with a mocking tone. Sonia was furious. She slid a designer handbag across the table.
Inside there is a diamond necklace. It cost more than your entire life. take it and leave.
Mona opened the bag, pulled out the necklace, and examined it with exaggerated admiration.
Wow. Omo, this one shine well low. I could sell this and buy myself a house in a very fine estate.
Mona leaned back in her chair, arms crossed.
But I'm not leaving Hillary. You see, you and I aren't so different. You want Hillary, I want Hillary. The difference is, I'm not pretending. You, on the other hand, you are fighting so hard to be someone he doesn't even want anymore. He wants me. You're fighting for him. You should be ashamed.
Mona declared.
How dare you insult me, you rude street rat. This isn't over.
Sonia cried out and stormed out of the restaurant. The Normans were desperate. They hired private investigators to dig up dirt on Mona, hoping to uncover some scandal from her past. But Mona, despite her wild ways, was too smart to let anything catch up with her. She continued to live life her way, unbothered, laughing in the face of every obstacle. One day, Mrs. Norman, Sonia, and other family members cornered her at a charity event Hillary invited her to. They offered her a final deal, 100 million naira, a house, and a car, all hers if she left Hillary and disappeared for good. Mona looked at them, pretending to genuinely be considering the offer for a moment. But it all went south in a second.
That's a lot of money, and I would be lying if I say I'm not tempted. But here is the thing. Hillary bought me new shoes last week, and he said he wants to take me to Paris next month. I'm still not leaving. I really want to go to Paris. And it won't happen if I leave him now.
At that, everyone's jaws dropped. Hillary arrived just in time to hear the tail end of the conversation. He walked up to Mona, took her hand, and kissed it in front of everyone.
I love you just the way you are.
Mona grinned, then turned to them.
Well, it looks like we're going to Paris after all. Bye!
Even though she rejected all the money, Mona knew something better was ahead of her, Hillary's love, a better life and happiness. Truth that she has always wanted a soft life, but she refused to take it at the detriment of someone's broken heart, not to mention the heart belonging to that of the man she has ever loved. She wanted a good life with clear conscience, and she got it all with no regrets. Their love wasn't like the fairy tales, smooth and perfect, but it was real. And that was more than enough for her.